Well, the Stan Getz and Charlie Bird album was the first bossa nova recording, which Ed Green, I was working for Ed at the time, and that made history. It was on the top of the charts for months, and the jazz station here did a survey of the top 100 jazz recordings of all time, and this came in number 3.
What made those recordings so good?
Well, I would say at least for the 47s and probably the 49, there was an upward tilt at the high end. They weren't real flat, and if you ever took a Neumann 47 or 49 into an anechoic chamber and ran some curves on it, which Floyd Toole did, he said you would absolutely die if you think speakers are bad. You should see what these microphones do. Part of the magic potion was the fact that vacuum tubes run on very high voltages. And I know all the stuff I built for Ed, the mic preamps would put out a minimum of plus 30 into a 100K load before I could measure the distortion. Now that's the equivalent of 1 watt if it was 600 ohms. And it was all vacuum tubes. It was unbalanced except for the mic inputs. And so you're talking lots and lots and lots of headroom. The mixer was a Cascode 12BK7 with big hunka-chunka UTC input and output transformers. So it was mic in, 8 in, a mix bus, a passive mix bus. There were 2 left, right, and a send. And then it came back out mic level, and it went into the Ampex through its big hunka-chunka transformers at mic level. So by the time you got through with the gig, the sound had gone through probably a dozen or more transformers per channel. And that's what you heard. So anybody that says that transformers are a bad idea is not with it, in my opinion. But, you know, that was then, this is now. I mean, transformers got a bum rap back in the early 70s when they started making transformers that were not even good paperweights. They went cheap, 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 because, you know, the bean counters are running the show. And transformers are fine. And if you need something to stop a hum and that's all you've got, I'll take a clean feed with a transformer in it any day over a dirty feed. That was the setup. Ed had a couple of 47s. He had an M49. This is all vacuum. This is with the old Tuchel connectors and the power supplies and the whole. And we had to beat up on them a good bit. And that was back when Gotham Audio was the Neumann distributor for the world, or for North America anyway. And we discovered the hard way that you don't want to tell them what you've done, even if it made an improvement, because Temmer would go ballistic. Stephen Temmer. And there's a long series of stories there, but anyway, he was known by none less than guys like Phil Ramone as the Nazi. And it turned out he went to a Hitler youth camp in Austria before he moved over here. And I hate to cast words of disparagement against those of us who aren't here anymore, but oi. Oh, and the other big gig that Ed and I did was Count Basie and Sammy Davis Jr. in Detroit. An album called My Shining Hour. I've got that as a copy of the Cutting Master also in my file. Funny story about that, Basie was on the road playing the Michigan State Fair, and Sammy was on the road with his show called Golden Boy. And they both ended up in Detroit, probably by accident, but anyway, MGM put the deal together to do a week. And they rented this old vaudeville movie theater that was showing a double feature when the first one was Godzilla versus the Thing, and the second one was the Carpetbaggers. And Val Valentine, who was the MGM guy, got a hold of the projectionist, and he edited an entire reel out of the Carpetbaggers. And that let us get on stage about midnight rather than about 1 o'clock. And so what happened is they fly the screen, they pull the drapes aside, or the curtains, and they had these big Altec A4s, and they the horns, speakers, and they'd roll them out of the way. And about 1 o'clock, the band would start trickling in, and they had about an hour to, get their chops together and have a drink or whatever they wanted to do. And then they would play all night. But I tell you, the experience of my lifetime was walking out on that stage and just walking around and listening to these cats warming up, just swinging their brains out, basically. It was awesome.